Now, joining us on the show today, somewhere near Chicago, part of Chicago, is Steve DeWitt. He's a senior pastor of Bethel Church there, and he's recently written a book called Loneliness. Don't hate it or waste it, but redeem it. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Lizzie, and digitally in New Zealand, a place I've never been, but would love to come visit sometime.
You'll have to come. Steve, I know for yourself, you're writing this book about loneliness. It's something that you have experienced quite a bit of yourself. I'm a little bit familiar with your story that, you were a pastor, a single pastor for something like 20 years. That would be quite rare, I would imagine, Steve, to be a single pastor for that big length of time.
I was, yes, it was odd. I was referred to as the bachelor pastor, and not a title I ever aspired to. I took no vow of celibacy. I wanted to get married. I prayed for my wife for some 25 years, and yet it just wasn't God's plan. So I had these 8,000 nights I calculated of aloneness to think about, what is this gnawing feeling I have inside, this loneliness?
Yeah.
And so I tell the story and I write the book out of things I learned regarding loneliness. And as the subtitle says, don't hate it or waste it, redeem it. And that really is the mission of the volume.
Yeah. For me, I'm somebody who likes alone time. As a creative, I'm very good with alone time. But occasionally, I get that feeling of loneliness. I'm like, oh gosh, I hate that feeling. And then when I think of other people being lonely, that makes me feel sad. But you're saying that we shouldn't haste it. We shouldn't hate it. We shouldn't waste it. What do we do with those feelings, Steve, when that sort of happens for us?
I kind of like that word haste it that you just created there. Don't hate it or waste it. Don't haste it.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
So, excellent. One of the things that I think is absolutely critical to know how to deal with loneliness, and as a side note, all the studies, medical and otherwise, indicate that we are in a worldwide epidemic of loneliness, and the effects of it are devastating physically even. They compare it to smoking 10 or 20 packs of cigarettes like a day. It just is, it's not good. And so many people are in a grinding loneliness. And why do we feel this way? Why do we have this ache inside? And so I go back to the Bible. I'm a pastor. I believe the Bible explains reality. And so, you look at Adam there in the garden, and many people mistakenly think that Adam was lonely. It doesn't say he was lonely. It says he was alone. Okay. He was alone.
Okay.
Eve was not created for his loneliness. Eve was created for his aloneness. And even more important is the fact that God created Adam in his own image. And that reflection of the character of God, who is three in one, in unity, but also in diversity, explains why God made us the way that he did, and why relationship with him and with other people is so absolutely critical. So loneliness is not the presence of something. It is the absence of something or someone that we were designed by God to have in our life.
Yeah.
And when that person isn't there, we have this achy, uncomfortable feeling inside. So loneliness appears as a result of sin. It's not sin itself, but it's part of the broken world that we live in.
Yeah.
And so learning how to deal with it biblically through the gospel is part of my mission in this.
Yeah. So kind of reading between the lines, Steve, I feel like you're not saying that the answer for everyone is to get married, are you?
No, it's not a book about marriage or singleness, although that just happens to be my story and experience of it.
Yeah.
I would argue marital loneliness is arguably the worst kind of loneliness, second only maybe to losing a spouse and living alone after that. So, it's a subject we come to with such compassion, and to recognize that people are not lonely because they want to be lonely. None of us want to be lonely. So pastorally, great care and compassion is certainly a starting point. But loneliness tries to convince us we're always going to feel this way. It's never going to be any different than that. And I am on a mission to get rid of the victimization with loneliness and to help people redeem it.
Wow. And I know that's what your book talks about, redeeming it. But tell us today, what are some of the ways that loneliness can be redeemed in our lives?
Well, I'll do a quick flyby here.
Yeah,
There's a lot to unpack in
that.
this, but the big picture is that clearly our loneliness for God is the foundational loneliness of the human experience ever since Genesis 3. Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee, as Augustine famously said. And so we look to the gospel of Jesus and the provision of redemption in Christ by faith in him as the restoration of a relationship with our Creator. It has to start there. Otherwise, we will be eternally lonely, and that's the worst loneliness of all. But horizontal loneliness is typically where most of us feel it. Okay. And when it comes to loneliness, to understand that loneliness, like hunger or thirst, is an indication that something that is needed is not there. Okay. And we don't resent our hunger. If we're not hungry, we're sick, something's wrong. And so loneliness is like a relational hunger. It indicates that we need something. So recognizing that is the first key, and then doing something about it, leveraging the energy that loneliness creates in us, the longing that it creates, to motivate us to take action. But the action has to be the opposite of what people typically think. Typically, we think, oh, I need somebody in my life, and if I get the right person in my life, then I'm not going to be lonely anymore. That doesn't work. And we know that because you can have a lot of people in your life. That was my story. I pastored a very large church as a single man, and yet I was terribly lonely. It's not having someone in your life, it is sacrificing for someone in your life. And in doing that, we follow the example of Jesus, who came, gave all that he had for us. I talk about gospelizing your loneliness. And then the key is we have to understand how to give our loneliness away. So we invert the desire to think, I need to add somebody to my life. And rather we look and say, whose loneliness can I try to solve? How can I give my loneliness away by meeting those needs in somebody else? And it's that love of God through us that mitigates the loneliness in us. That is the key. So give it away, New Zealand. Give that loneliness away, and it will fade into the background of your emotional experience.
That's awesome. I really love the way you're sort of flipping it, and then it becomes empowering for each of us rather than, perhaps feeling a bit of a victim of loneliness, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. As a pastor, I see this. People come to our church, and you can tell they're kind of like, somebody be nice to me. We're looking for somebody in our life. And those people don't last typically because they have to come to church and be like, hey, how can I serve? Who can I serve? Those are the people that will end up with some mitigation of their loneliness. Yeah. So give it away. That's the key.
Yeah, I like that. I can think of a way in my own life. Like I say, I'm quite busy. Every now and then I get this little feeling. And interestingly enough, this thought goes through my head. In my local community, there is I don't know if you have them where you are, community gardens. If it's something that you guys do. So people in the community.
Some people, yeah.
Yeah, come together. There's this public space that this group of people have come together. They get together on a Sunday afternoon. I think the couple that actually run it are Christians. And people are there and they're making food and they're growing things and they're selling stuff. And I keep thinking, I should put my gardening gloves in my pocket and walk down the road. And I keep not doing it. But I think that would be a good way from a practical point of view of giving it away. I'd get to meet some new people, and I love fresh fruit and veggies. Do you think that could be a good way of doing it, Steve?
Fresh fruit and vegetables, a great key to redeeming loneliness. I would say that it depends. You can go to a garden selfishly, or you can go to a garden selflessly. Selflessly will mitigate loneliness. That's why, some people get a pet and will argue that a pet helps. And I think a pet can help, because a pet is inconvenient. You have to rearrange your schedule. You got to think about that pet, feeding the pet. And in that sense, I'm living for something else. and it helps to mitigate loneliness. Even better is a human being, and the best is God himself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, it's so good to chat with you today, Steve. The name of the book is called Loneliness. Don't Hate It or Waste It, but Redeem It, by Steve DeWitt. Thank you so much, Steve, for your time today.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you can catch all our interviews on Star. See you next time.